Welcome to the David Spisak Show. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy holidays to you all. Don't know where you are. Don't know what your plans are, but whatever it may be, most importantly, I hope that you are able to spend them with your dear loved ones, that you have absolutely the best time of your life, and that we just take the time to remember how precious those moments are. I'm so delighted to have this gentleman on. His name is Adam Arens, and Adam is the owner and operator of Patriot Auto Group. And you may not know of Patriot Auto Group. I think that far more people in the country know of Patriot Auto Group based on where they're located. I mean, you would think based on location or maybe size, volume, that they wouldn't have a big awareness. But because of Adam, and because of his reputation, rightly so, for being a true innovator, disruptor in our space, and I'll get to that, I think that has kind of allowed a lot of people to really get to know Adam, his belief system, ideologies, and what makes Patriot Auto Group so special. So without further ado, Adam Arens, thank you for taking the time to join me.
Well, thank you for having us. It's an honor to be here, and I will maybe not start out, but pretty quickly correct you. It's not because of me. It's because of the way we execute and because of the shared vision. And I will say this, because of the tenure of our people. It's the longer somebody's with you, it doesn't get them to be better. But if you're in an organization that continues to learn and grow, it doesn't upset their stomach when you learn and grow. And they know that that's what we're going to do, right? So our people are terrific, and they allow me the freedom to be able to report on our successes.
I'm really glad, thankful that you pointed that out, and it is quintessentially you. It is exactly why I have the level of admiration and respect for you, is that at no time, do you have an interest in putting the spotlight on yourself. You're always wanting to throw the spotlight outward to your people, and I do agree with you. It's interesting that you say that with tenure, because it's kind of like with tenure, you're growing that culture that everybody wants so much. They want so desperately. And what you're doing is you've gone beyond creating the culture and growing the culture. Now it's really cementing the culture to where you're not the only one running with that flag of culture. You've got undoubtedly a lot of owners, from frontline people to techs to salespeople to management, that all have that ownership mentality. Treat the store like it's theirs, treat clients like they're theirs, as they should. And when you have that in a business, we're the great beneficiaries of that. So
yeah, we certainly earn the right to change their hard drives. And that's not by erasing them. That's by showing them that it can be done this way, in a way where they're going to be loved if their intentions are good. And it's difficult when you have somebody who's new, and let's say they came from someplace else, especially if you're hiring managers from outside, and they come in and they're going to function in a way that they were taught. And we've discussed this before briefly, but they might have been taught by somebody who did it so well that they got fired, right? or had really bad personal habits and still did a decent job at work. In our case, the culture drives out those people whose hard drives won't change, but we don't erase them. We work through them and get it to the point where the equity in our business for them is much greater than the bad things that may have happened to them. And in today's world, everybody's gone through some difficulties in their life. So we don't look for the best people. We look for good people and give them the best environment. But we'll talk about that if you like.
Yeah, Jim Rohn, one of my favorite speakers of all time, God rest his soul, he said one time he was driving up to Reno, and there was a billboard, up near where all those Reno casino resorts are. And one of them said, we don't train our people to be nice. We just hire nice people.
Right.
And you can't train nice. You can't, create nice. People either own that or not. People own caring or they don't. So, well, let's jump into a couple things. First of all, when you think of the word innovation, transformation, innovation, reinvention, or disruption, what's just the general thoughts that pop into your brain?
Well, for me, that some of that hits the risk-taking part of your mind, right? So you're going to go try and invest into something that you know should be better if you do things this way, and you're going to fail at that many times. And I'm going to say, from as much as we might be considered innovators, I think our formula is a little different than that. And that is, I think we're fast followers. So we're a learning organization that is willing to listen to what people have to say as it relates to doing things better. And then we're fast followers. If somebody's already getting close to being ready to go or have some small proof sets that it's worked someplace else, that's really the thing that tickles us. And then rather than starting with the decision maker, which I think I'm the ultimate decision maker, we tell people that if you want to share in our group, then you need to find somebody else who uses the stuff every day, especially if it's technology. Work through them. If they love it, they'll bring it to me, and then we'll have a little bit of trial and error. And by the way, I may doubt you as a role as opposed to truly doubting you when it comes down to how your software works or how you want things to go. So we work, and I would say you could start anywhere in our organization, and they could incubate an idea, whether it was from outside the organization or inside the organization, and then we would be that fast follower. Yes, we've invested some personal money into some technologies to try to help and shape that and bring it to a financial positive thing. But we're really better at that fast follow. That's our eyes are open, our ears are open. We're listening to what other people are doing, and when it makes sense, we're jumping in before most will jump in.
So you're kind of the B round kind of folks. You're not
Absolutely.
the seed round or A round. You're the B. So in other words, once you see it's got traction, validation, utilization, and the potential for total transformation, you're like, hello, let's jump on board.
Yeah. I was just going to say, there's a problem in all of these relationships. There's what they say, there's what you hear, there's what you expect, and their level of support. When you're in that A round, there's so much development going on, and I'm tired of hearing from small organizations or big organizations, we're going to get to that. And you ask for a timeline, and the timeline's a bullshit line, right? It just never happens. And then you identify these partners that you can do business with where the timeline's real, where they reach out to you and they say, okay, I need your feedback. And I said, you don't need my feedback. You need my GSM's feedback. You need my service manager's feedback. You need a service advisor's feedback. You need a salesperson's feedback. You don't need mine. They're the people that are dealing with that innovation on a daily basis. And then I used to say often that my job was to innovate at a rate where people didn't lose their crap, where they didn't go spinning sideways because there was too much change going on. But I think the pace of change in the world has changed. And you can't switch all the time, but you could be switching something almost all the time, and then put it in a 60 to 90 day window and then move to the next thing in almost every department. And so we've broken some relationships in the recent past and over the last few years that were good relationships because there was better partnerships out there. There were specifically in technology support for our people, in software in the service lane, in software using AI, in software in our appraisal system and our marketing. And by the way, if you're doing the same advertising you were a year ago, you're probably on the wrong street today.
You're
right?
losing.
And so without trying to interrupt everybody in the organization, if it starts from them, you include them, they get their input, and you choose the right partner, it's harmony. But we all have that risk of choosing the wrong partner or staying where we were and missing the way we want to serve our people. And
don't you think, Adam, I mean, just at baseline, let's jump on that. Just at baseline, if I'm going to show up on a basketball court, football field, soccer field, lacrosse field, whatever, I mean, first of all, it does start with ownership. It does start with leadership. It does start with management. It starts with the head coach. But at the end of the day, I want to put the best set of players on the field. One of the things that confuses me at times, I just don't understand it. I mean, I do get the fact that there's a healthy percentage of a population in any industry where good is good enough for some reason, or just as they've subscribed to the religion of this is just the way we've always done it, or they're afraid of change, or frankly, let's be honest, they don't want to undertake it because it's work. Right? I could just keep doing what I'm doing and I could do it in my sleep, or I can reinvent and now I have to truly start doing something all over again. It's like why some people would rather hire a 8-car, 10-car a month salesperson who's got 10 years experience being mediocre or average, because I could just throw them out on the floor without training, rather than taking somebody who has massive upside potential because they're nice, because they care. But now I have to pour into them. So let's start with that. So, it's not easy for people necessarily to say, well, let me take a hard look at my tech stack. And if I want to be great, for example, in used cars, you were kind enough to join our virtual used car event. Thank you. And it was tremendous what you shared. I got so much fantastic feedback about some of the true innovations you shared, like in reconditioning and ideal inventory, things of that nature. But, you could have just stayed with where you were. Everybody was comfortable with the technology they were using. And you just could have, by right, stayed there. But instead, you started to look outward. You found that kind of B round, that company that had gone out in the marketplace, had proven itself, had validated, had a great team, had the ability to do what you needed to be done. And so you made a switch you mentioned VinCue during the used car event.
Yeah, we went to VinCue. We left one of my closest friends when we left V Auto, and we just thought that VinCue could help us do so many things. And let me bring you back a little bit, right? So every year the goal is to grow. So you want to grow your service department by whatever percent. In our case, it's 20%. 10 of it's going to be natural growth through raises that we give ourselves by changing the door rate or changing the warranty rate, et cetera. But truly to grow at least 10% in the amount of
true
our
organic growth,
right?
Yeah.
And then we want to grow 15% in used cars, and we want to grow 10% in new cars. All of these things have to happen on a monthly basis. But the key to all of that growth is if we sell more used cars, we're going to impact every other department. And yet, in my mind, the thing that I used to preach, and I know I'm old, but this is going to make me sound old, 30 or 40 years ago, you can't be a good new car dealer without being a good used car dealer.
That's true.
And you can't maximize your service unless you're a good used car dealer. And you can't maximize your service unless you're putting units in operation that intend to come back to you, right? So, and then you can't be good parts department unless you do the units. It's all connected to each other, and everybody has an impact in what they do. And so when we started to examine that, we started to look at VinCue as a tool, and combined in our tech stack VinCue and LotPop, and turned into the fastest moving used car dealer. And our only weakness in used cars was the acquisition process, and that was that we weren't acquiring enough, right? So trade ratios came down during COVID. This is a long answer to a very short question, but trade ratios came down during COVID. Lease numbers went down during COVID. And we thought that VinCue was clearly a better answer when it came to vehicle acquisition in the service lane, vehicle acquisition from consumers through Facebook Marketplace, through Craigslist, et cetera. And we had one general manager who said, I don't want to leave. I said, then don't leave. I'm not going to force anything down their throat. Until 6 months later, and their used cars weren't growing at the same rate that everybody else was. Their acquisition process wasn't faster. And we did the same amount of training, trained around both tools. And finally I said, are you ready? And he said, yes. And sometimes you got to let them win. And this was a mistake, but it's fine. And it'll never go down as a mistake. So I think what happened was our VinCue field manager had less responsibilities than our V Auto field manager. VinCue acted like a nimble company who was developing constantly, where I didn't feel like that was the case at VAuto. And that's part of being part of that huge company. And I think Cox has made a positive impact on the world. I just don't know that they're good for a company that wants somebody to be nimble. And within the tech stack of using all of their stuff, this goes back to Sandy's days. If it goes really well, it works great, and everybody connects to everybody, and it really works well. They never got there. And the day that they get there, tomorrow, they won't be ready for the next day, because I just think it's too big with too many plugins and too many silos it's a huge job to get technology to talk to each other. And I'm not aware of how to do it. I'm just saying that if you're going to try to make your salespeople more efficient, at some point, you're going to have to certify them to appraise cars. If you're going to try to trade with people without seeing their car, at some point, you're going to have to empower people. And that's where you need this right technology. And for us, what VinCue did was make it very easy to see what we consider the most pertinent information about a vehicle. And that's what cars are actually sold for, not selling for. What cars actually sold for in the recent past in your proximity of similar miles, similar equipment, and the condition that we consider them in. And so with all the data that's out there, because they're data companies, I think my last time using VAuto is that most of the data that they were relying on was auction data. And auction data is the least reliable data, especially if you're us, and we don't buy cars at the auction. We absolutely will not buy cars at the auction. We will have somebody else buy a car at the auction and sell it to us occasionally, but we will not buy a car at the auction. So why are you relying on the source that you're never going to use, where they're having a sale rate which they don't report publicly through VAuto or even VinCue of, in some cases, 10% on certain models, 5%? So if a car is run through the auction 7 times in 7 weeks, what does it matter what it sold for?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Because it's funny.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny. I have this slide I show people all the time, dealers, about that. I said, if you want to understand, like just literally get punched in the face to understand why auction cars consistently, and I'm not for any of you auction folks who love auctions, God bless you. If you figure out how to use it and how to make it work for you, God bless you. It's fine. But I do have a problem with any time I've never seen a dealer that populates their lot more than 10%, 15% with auction cars that's profitable. I've just never seen it. Secondly, by its very nature, when you add transportation and auction fees and you're standing in the lane putting your hand up against 20, 30 other people who are all bidding on a car that's not really what car they wanted, but it's somewhat close, similar, you're going to pay more money. And so at the end of the day, being a data freak, I really looked into this and I looked at 50,000 different transactions across many different franchises. And you're looking at nearly a $2,000 spread between identical cars, what somebody pays on auction. The other, you don't have to be a math major to figure out, that's probably not going to work out well. And then it really boils down to this. Yeah. Well, one last thing, I want to hear your take on this. I said, you understand that typically in an auction, they may have a 50% roughly sell-through rate, right, last week. So that means 50% of the cars that will be at the auction this week will be cars that 100% of the used car managers in your area said, I'm not touching it. I'm going to pass on it. Think about that. Not a single used car manager in your area wanted to touch it. But there's also going to be some new entries. And those other 50%, not all of them, but most of them are cars that sat on a lot for 45 to 60 days and no retail customer wanted to touch it. How many of those do you want?
Right.
So is it any surprise it's not a happy ending most of the time in those situations? So I love where you're going there.
Well, I think the auction's a great place to sell cars that you otherwise can't sell.
Great.
But we don't even do that very often. We sell we have our own private auction, but I won't go there. But I think there's been 2 survivable major used car only franchises out there that are operating as company stores, and that's Carvana and CarMax. And I think they got better at a couple of things than we did. So we have I think the 3 biggest advantages in used cars that they don't have, and that is we trade for most of them through the front door. We have a service lane, and we have lease returns.
Yes.
And the next is public and the auction. So they, for many years, were buying cars at the auction because without that, they didn't have cars. But they also created this brand where if you go to my next door neighbor and said, you want to sell your car today, where are you going to take it? If they're anywhere in proximity of a CarMax, they're going to go there because they've created the Kleenex of we buy your car.
That's right.
And they have a process that allows it to happen fast. And we've tried to learn from them. And then the second place where they've really kicked our butts, and I think retailers, is that they've created a used car reconditioning process that's faster, requires less decisioning, maybe no decisioning, and it's done as a production line. And so, interestingly enough, we were running out of space in one of our dealerships, and so that you get these problems presented to you by a manager, and they're like, we're running out of space, we're running out of places to park, we don't have enough techs to do this, but our garages are full, everything's happening. And I said, okay, so when we build our new franchise, we're going to move all the used car reconditioning there. Half of the shop is going to be dedicated to used car reconditioning. The other half is going to be towards the franchise, which in this case is an Acura store. So we built a garage twice as big as it needed to be. And then they said, well, I can't get the cars from one facility over to the other facility. I said, hire some people that look like David and I. In other words, we should be retired, but we're not. And have them shuttle cars all day or buy a truck. I don't care. And all of a sudden, the problem solving, and I wouldn't call it wisdom, but certainly tenure of who we are started to solve more problems. And I will say this. In our company, and I'm not going to say we have many that are defined as, but in every company, you have two types of people. You have problem starters and problem solvers. Mm-hmm. And the more problems you solve, the more money you make. That's in sales, that's as a technician, that's as an advisor, that's as an office manager, comptroller. That's what it comes down to. So sometimes when it gets to David or it gets to me, then let's describe the problem, and the clarity of the solution is easy, right? We're out of parking spaces, so we want some new cars to be held at the port. I said, no, we're not. Or we need you to go rent another lot or buy another lot so we can park some cars. I said, no, we need to sell cars faster. We need to process them through service faster, especially used cars. And we need to take the wholesale cars, the cars that are sold to other people, and let them know that we're charging them $50 a day for every car that they leave here after 24 hours after they buy it in our auction. Problems are gone, right? It just it takes some drive to make that happen. So one of the wholesalers actually came up to me and said, listen, I buy 7 or 8 cars from you a week. And I said, what day do you buy them? He said, Tuesday, like everybody else does. And I said, okay. And I need till Friday to get the cars out of there. I said, well, price in, bid $50 a day less for the cars then. He says, I'll get them out of there by Wednesday. Right? It's really that simple.
It's amazing. Yeah. Motivation, true motivation. It's always on the financial side. So one of the things that you touched on a number of things during the used car event. One of them was ideal inventory. And in used cars, everything happens on the buy side, right? The sell happens on the buy side. So one of the things that I find that many, many dealerships still have not been able to figure out, as crazy as it sounds, is what is their ideal inventory in their marketplace. And I see that they're consistently buying cars that are outside the lines of their ideal inventory. Now that might make, model, mileage, mostly cost of sales, the biggest one. And when they step outside those lines, I see it in the data all the time, Adam, is that the further you go outside those lines, the more days it takes to sell the car. And what I'm always teaching dealers is, first of all, a couple things. Your target needs to be turning 80% of your cars within 30 days. Now, I don't honestly care if you turn them wholesale or retail. I will tell you this, if your acquisition game is on point, there's no reason for you to keep a car retail beyond. I've got dealers who'll say, I don't have cars, so I'm going to keep them. Why? If you had the right inventory, those cars would have been gone after 5 days. Let's be honest. And let's also be honest about this. If a car's sitting on your lot for more than 20 days, that's not a car somebody wants to buy. It's a car you have to sell.
Right.
Cars you have to sell take longer, more advertising, more floor plan, more sales comp, right? It's just all bad.
Well,
So-
you have to kind of figure out what kind of buyer you have, what kind of acquisition person you have, right? So there's everybody knows how to lowball a car, but if you and your wife were out looking at homes and you see a house that appraises for $500,000 that you can buy for $450,000, but it's in the wrong neighborhood for you, or doesn't have the right number of bedrooms or bathrooms, does that matter, or would you spend $600,000 on the right house in the right
100%.
neighborhood where she wants
everybody
to live?
would.
Right.
Everybody
and
would.
by the way, it only appraises for $600,000, right? So
Yeah.
there are some value buyers, and there was people at the auction that would run from lane to lane to lane to buy value, and I was like, figure out what works for you. And then the acquisition, listen, we're forced to make a bid, happily, on every car that's offered as a trade. We're not forced to make a bid on every car that goes through the service lane, although most of them are your brand and you should. But when it comes to outside acquisition, and that is the process of contacting people through Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and cars.com, why are you calling on cars that you don't want? Now, you can have somebody who buys cars just for wholesale. That's fine. But if there's not a meeting amongst the general manager, we don't have used car managers. It's just one of the faults of how we run our businesses. But through the general manager and the sales managers and the acquisition team on a weekly basis, talking about the things that we really need. And that should happen for your service lane acquisition team as well. Our service lane, because of our brands, we want everything that comes through there, basically. And we'll buy stuff for wholesale as well. And by the way, buying wholesale cars is a profit maker if you know how to do it.
100%.
But on the retail side, go buy what you want. Buy what the market wants. Buy what you turn in 7 days. And if it takes you 30 days to recondition a collision car because of the current collision space in your market, whether that's internally or externally, then you got to buy a car knowing what it's going to be worth 30 days from now. But we have actually tried to stock 4 or 5 at a time electric cars, including Teslas. And of course, if you buy Teslas, you're going to get burned. There's that day when he announces a $15,000 price reduction, you're going to get burned. But you will find if you're turning those 4 or 5 on a consistent basis. In our case, we sold 9 electric cars out of an inventory of 4 last month with an average gross of $9,200 front and back, and we do not sell warranties on them.
Crazy. Isn't it funny how it's such a struggle to sell EVs as new cars, but they're brilliant as pre-owned cars. If you know what you're doing, if you understand, it's crazy. It's not like a used car. You don't look at it based on the odometer. You look at it based on the battery health, right? And the condition of the car. And you have to have people that are enthusiasts inside your dealership, EV enthusiasts, in order to be able to create that really great connection, because those buyers are a little bit different.
Well, yeah, and talk about the value buyer, right? So they absolutely appeal to a value buyer, right? They're people that generally think they're smart. They understand what the electric part is, right? We discourage people from buying new electrics. We encourage them to lease. But on the used car, the people that want to, they're looking at a car that window stickered at 95 that they can buy for 45 with 18,000 miles on it, 2 years old. Still under full factory warranty for multiple years coming out of that. And they can buy it for 45 and I can buy it for 37.
Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy.
And they've gone back to the place that they bought it, the people that had it, and offered to ask, would you guys like to buy this? And they say, no, we're not buying them now. And
It's a perfect storm,
right,
for profitability.
That's an Audi store. That's happened at a Mercedes store. That's happened at a BMW store.
Oh, they want nothing to do with them because they got PTSD on the new ones that are stacked up on the lots. They don't want to look at them.
Correct.
And it's a huge gain. So how does, when you look at things like that, you mentioned cars.com as an acquisition source. You mentioned Craigslist. You mentioned Facebook Marketplace. And, obviously you've spoken many times about ideal inventory. So how is VinCue different in your mind when it comes to allowing you to pursue, really have clarity on that ideal inventory and be able to create a discipline around it, a process around it that allows you to have a sustainably successful used car department, not one that, hey, we knock it out of the park this month and then we pay for it the next 2 months.
Well,
how do you use it in that way?
I think we think that their technology is better in identifying and making it easy for us to bring those cars in and then to eliminate the ones that we're not looking for, right? So it just happens very quickly where they're spending 30 or 40 minutes a week in the technology defining what it is we're after, and then every day bringing in whatever comes into the market. But they also have coaching, and they have a coach on the vehicle acquisition, vehicle buying center team. And so there's this, it's such a robust technology, and I'm sure everybody else's is, but the way that you use it on a daily basis is the way that you used it yesterday and the way you used it the day before. And there's so much more to it. So they have a coach who has helped us immensely. And we basically have a meeting with that coach just on the buying center and the technologies used on a weekly basis. But when I tell you he's been there for us 24/7, there's times when he has to call us back. But when something doesn't work, and it won't, because we're not hiring technology specialists to do our vehicle acquisition. We're hiring people who have never sold cars in many cases, or haven't sold cars in a long time, to engage in the technology, not be embarrassed by asking people to sell them, a car that they have on the market, following up with people from 1 day to 3 months. There's a lot of reasons that the people that you're in touch with have their car on the market. We don't really care. We don't buy the story. That's their story. We buy the car. But we have to be good listeners, and we have to make it easy for them in a way that other people can't, right? So their technology identifies when the car was sold and if it was sold to someplace else, and if it pops up on somebody else's lot. I mean, we don't lose. And we're not trying to acquire the most cars. We're trying to acquire the right cars at a place where we have margin. And I will tell you, the margin on those cars, electric aside, is a little bit less than the margin on cars that we trade for at the door, which is our number one margin. Our number two margin is the cars that we acquire in the service lane. Our number three margin is the cars that we acquire through our vehicle buying center, through consumers who are selling cars and not replacing them with us.
But I think it's really important to point out, because most people don't cut it that way. And it's really cool that you're doing that, because there really is a difference. There's a difference in margin and turn rate oftentimes, like with a loaner car, with an off-lease car, with an auction car, which all have, much different and less favorable turn rates and outcomes financially. But you just called out, which makes all the sense in the world. When I get a car off of a trade, that is truly my ideal inventory, right? If it fits within what my market wants, it is the ideal source and the ideal inventory. That's going to create the ideal outcome. And the next one you mentioned down was going to be the service drive ones. In both of those cases, I'm not bidding against anybody on those cars. The only reason the third one has a little bit of a diminishing in the financial outcome, of course, is because you're not standing there with 40 guys in an auction or 40 women in an auction, but there are other people in the marketplace talking to those people, just like a lead that you might get, where you're not the only person trying to sell that person a car. So it makes sense, but I think it's also important, isn't it, to draw a line that all three of those do create different levels of a favorable outcome for the dealership, both in terms of volume, gross, and even additional service business, right?
Right.
Yeah.
In our case, we took this very seriously as an endeavor last year. Our two biggest goals in last year were to increase our F&I profitability, our PVR, and then to increase our volume in used cars. Those were the two focuses, and that's how we engaged in the vehicle buying center, which created an opportunity for us to train and create a process of market-based assessments That is what other people call appraisals. And to have a way of doing it the right way to avoid as many mistakes as you possibly can. It doesn't mean you're not going to have mistakes, but to avoid it, and then communicate that, and then you can communicate that with the consumer. For the people in the vehicle buying center, we measure them based on appointments, not on acquisitions, right? And by the way, when you're buying cars from the public and they think their car's in one condition and you show them that's in another, and they were on their way intending to leave without the car and leave with a check or a payoff, whatever it may be, you might get some bad reviews. And that's part of this game too. And some people can't stomach that, but I can't stomach a 2-to-1 new to used or a 3-to-1 new to used. And believe me, there are other people that run their businesses differently. I mean, I know retailers who only sell their brand used. And I ask them, is it because of square footage and acreage? And they say, no, that's all our people want to do, and it works for us. God bless you. Your wholesaler's making a ton of money from you then.
Well, not only that, I was sharing with somebody, it's funny you say that, Toyota is number one in market share, as we know, across the country. But I think last I looked, they had about an 18% market share. And I was showing a dealer, I literally drew a square out on the screen, a rectangle, and I said, here's your market. So I'm going to draw a line right here, where am I? This side, 18%. There's 18%. So you're saying that you've wittingly and willfully decided to basically terminate any potential relationship with 82% of the human beings in your market. Like, are you serious? So if you add, Honda, you add Ford, and you add Subaru, and you add whoever, and each one of those has a baseline market share, you're expanding your market. Makes no sense to me whatsoever. Why would you eliminate that? It's crazy to me. So
yeah, we have these huge advantages of being new car retailers who recondition cars at a different level than a used car lot will. A used car lot can do what we do, but then they don't have a competitive advantage because for the most part, they have to outsource their reconditioning to a profit center where we have that internal profit. So one of the things that we built was retail backwards in our appraisal / market-based assessment. So let's figure out what we can sell that car for in less than 10 days.
That's right.
Let's start from that. Perfect. And work backwards from there. And so if you can have a net zero front end profit, but have parts profit, service, parts profit at 40%, or at service profit at 70%, a doc fee and F&I, you can sell cars at zero all day long.
And do very, very well because you're paying nothing on floor plan, nothing on advertising, and nothing in terms of additional comp. The comp is paid on a percentage. In other words, your comp plan works when you turn cars in 15 days or less. It's a disaster when you get over 30 days. And I've looked at data across countless stores, thousands of stores. And if you look at every car that is sold after 30 days, the average gross is negative, period. So These things are milk cartons. They've got an expiration date. Max gross is 7 days. Max gross maybe minus 25 at 15. Max gross minus 50% of max gross at between 15 and 30. And 30 days, the milk goes bad.
And I think when you look in VinCue, and one of the in the sold data, so it tells you how long they had the car in the market. It tells you how many times they've made digital price drops, etc. But you're also combining that with the other things that you're seeing, which is you can see the Carfaxes on those cars. So you're comparing an apple to an apple, and all we want to do is speed up that apple, right? So we're disregarding everything that was on a dealer's lot for 90 days. We're disregarding most of what's sold at used car only centers other than CarMax, Carvana. So Joe's Used Car had that car on there. We're basically disregarding it. So we're looking at apple to apple. And by the way, we're not completely disregarding it if it's a great, strong car, right? But the reconditioning standards of somebody who has a floor plan with a captive, has a manufacturer standard, has a certification process that's measured and managed by the manufacturers, et cetera, is different than an independent used car store. So the ideal comparison is going to be 5 cars within 100 miles that sold in the last 15 days at new car retailers on their used car lot. That's the ideal. Sometimes we have to go out further, and sometimes we have to include other people's inventory because there's just that unique a car or truck. And when we do that, we kind of take notes. This is how I priced it. So the last 3 sold at $23,000. We want to be able to be on the market at $22,000, work backwards from there and what the car is going to require in reconditioning, et cetera. And then never present, and I know this is crazy to other people because they do it all day, never present a round number on a car to anybody. And so if the car comes out at 22 minus reconditioning, minus standard reconditioning, minus some other things that might be there, comes out to 18,422, then that's what we present to the people. We have an estimator in our, combined with VinCue, and by the way, we use UVI as well, which is a outstanding tool, and you cannot sell us a car without the car going through UVI. And then we let the people see what's wrong with their car rather than tell them what's wrong with their car. But we also point out positives about their car. But it's more than just one thing. So I would say in the innovative part, we had nothing to do with developing UVI other than falling in love with what it does. So we were the fast followers in that. And somebody says, well, by the way, it's expensive. And by the way, it's expensive if you don't use it. It's almost free if you use it. So we take every car that comes onto our lot, whether it's in service, sales, or even a new car off the truck, and run it through UVI. And so I think last month we had something like 6,000 drive-throughs. So at $1 a car, it gave us whatever thousands of pictures per car, pointed out everything, and gave us a historical data. And the next place, and if you haven't seen UVI, I think you might have already, but the next place to see it is the rental car companies are going to put it in the airport. So they're going to inspect your car on its exit and when you return it. And the savings of, we haven't had one person come up to us since we put in UVI and said that dent wasn't there and not been able to show them, no, the dent was there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then, so once you acquire the car, and again, I love these process. Process oftentimes is equated with, it's stale. You're telling me what to do rather than allowing me to do what I want to do. I'm telling you what to do. If your process is rendering 8 cars a month or 10 cars a month and making no money, yeah, you bet I'm going to tell you what to do. And I always say, but if you come up with a process that delivers phenomenal results better than anybody else, we will not only replace the current process, we'll name it after you like it's a star. So, it's just like, but most people are in love with their own processes and rather than caring about the outcome. So now I've got the ideal inventory. I've got these acquisition strategies. You mentioned earlier about the recon, and then we all know it all comes down to the turn, and that turn is based on not just having the right car, but putting the right price on there. So how is VinCue helping you when it comes to understanding how do I turn what I know is a good car into that car that is going to move in under 15 days or under 7 days?
Well, let's price it right immediately, right? So that's before it's on the lot, before you have the title. And by the way, you can get in trouble in certain states, including some that we operate in. Put the price out there, get some pictures, replace the pictures when the car is cleaned up and ready to go, and start from there. But the combination of those two companies, they just happen to be in the same city, and I know they're not the same company, but Lot Pop and Jason Rice's program there, and VinCue, they're both in the same town. And I think it's more than a coincidence that they work so well together in our tech stack to price the car properly and allow us to contact other people who may have been looking at a similar car that we've already sold right up front and say, by the way, if you're still in the market for a car, and I hope that you are, we've replaced the one that you were interested in with a better one. Do you want me to send you information on that car, right? So that all of that stuff works together through your, in our case, Vin Solutions, VinCue, Lot Pop combination. But this, price it high and hope they make some money, that is the average general manager's view.
Yeah.
And I know that because I've heard that. And if the people are our age and have made tremendous wealth being in the car business, or good wealth being in the car business, that's still their view. And you got to change that. You just have to, because the velocity of the turns on your money are more important than the margin on your money. Because
100%.
Somebody can talk about a $10,000 deal all day long, but if you only do one a year, as opposed to somebody who does $52,000 deals, I'd rather have the $52,000 worth of margin, pay the 52 commissions, the 52 reconditioning fees, the profit off of all that, than the one car that made 10 grand. But the one we remember is the 10 grand. Listen, become the fastest, you will win, because you're going to be buying in a market that you're selling in, right? I don't care what your house was worth 3 years ago, and I don't care what your car was worth 3 years ago. It doesn't matter. It's all just part of a story that I'm not buying into. I'm buying into, this is what your car is worth today. This is what my car is worth today. We're priced under market. This is the number of cars in the market. We will share with you the other cars in the market. We've actually sent people links to websites of people who had other cars like ours in the market through our digital sales team. And that's part of this, by the way, and I know we haven't talked about it, in the evolution of fast followers, we now have hybrid people. Those are people that take the lead from the beginning to the end. It's not all of our salespeople. It's all of our salespeople who follow up and do things the right way, managed by somebody who's equivalent of a sales manager who only focuses on that, and they're not allowed to take fresh ups. They can only take what comes in through our digital channel. And so they are very focused on sending videos, etc. And then we had a meeting like 3 months ago. Send stuff that supports your position. Do the Progressive thing. Progressive tells you, come to my website and we'll send you everybody's. And by the way, CarMax is on this. They want to be able to post your cars on their site now. Acquire them at little or no margin, pay you almost what you're asking for, and control the retail.
Carvana tried that. If you remember, about 4 years ago, they came up with the seemingly great idea that, hey, Adam, tell you what, we could take all of your used cars, put them onto our website, and we get a lot more traction. In fact, we're taking a lot of the search that you're hoping to get. We've bought those terms, the ones that your franchise doesn't lie to buy. We buy all those. And so, and inventory dictates search. So we're getting a lot more leads. So we'll sell them. And the dealers, I couldn't believe a single dealer would have signed up, because once you give me your inventory and your data and your clients, what do you have left? So You could keep, they're letting you keep the recon. And what you've done, the hardest thing for them is that logistics and recon. You just solved it for your biggest competitor. They don't need help, right? They're making, I think some of these guys are making $7,000 a copy. They have flat figured it out, with these processes. And Carvana taking the Odessa auctions and turning them into recon sites and being able to regionalize distribution points. The cost efficiencies these two companies have now, the effectiveness, the efficiencies, the sales processes. I mean, this is a different level. So this is not for the faint of heart. You said something earlier. If you're doing the advertising you were doing a year ago, using the tech stack you're using a year ago, you're losing. I'm sorry, but you're losing. So
you're absolutely right. I think there's a big thing, and I want something for a takeaway for some of the people that are on here. If you can't get cars through your shop, hire a night shift. So serve your customers as best you can. Serve the consumer. Don't ever tell them they have to wait 3 weeks, 3 days, or 3 hours to bring a car in. Bring it in now, but figure it out at night and find techs. And they might be working in other dealerships where they're not busy. Whatever it is, and find it. And from 5 o'clock till midnight, run somebody in your parts department and at least assess cars one day, have the parts there the next day, get the car out of there in 36 hours rather than 3 days or 3 weeks. But amplify the hours that you're available. And I did learn something, and you brought it up, and that I love I was sitting when AutoNation started buying retail new car dealers. They bought some very good retailers. One of the best in the world, his name was Ed Mullinax.
No, I just was going to say the same thing. Fantastic
dealer. He was known
dealer.
to be the best and the inventor of true one-price vehicles. And he told me, and Jerry's a friend of mine as well, he told me that you have to have the car to have the traffic. And he was in I think it was an A-plan market in Ohio, but they also opened up in Florida where not everybody's in an A-plan market. But he said, listen, if you want to sell X number of hundreds of cars, you have to have the car. You can't miss somebody in market because you didn't have that car. And it's expensive nowadays to have that car. But in used cars, it's so easy to know what's selling. And yes, you're going to miss some people. I hope I don't have a lot of Corvettes in the winter in Maine. It's just convertibles. So I'm going to miss somebody. But that's not the worst thing. But to have those cars that we know are going to turn, those cars with 25, 30, and 40,000 miles, those cars that are 70 and 80,000 miles. And by the way, expand your comfort zone. And that is retail good quality cars that are over 100,000 miles now. And I'm not telling you to retail good quality cars over 250,000 miles, but at 120, 130,000 miles, those cars in some cases, most cases, are still financeable. They're in good shape. Cars are built better in the last 10 or 15 years than they ever were, and they're reliable. And they have most of the safety features of a brand new car. So we've had to do all of that. But when your service department slows you down, when it becomes uncomfortable for you to recondition those cars, by the way, they require a great deal of reconditioning. That's a good thing. They do slow you down, but that's that $15,000 car of yesterday that you can't seem to find that looks good other than the clock. But you put new tires on it, you put new brakes on it, you do 150,000 mile check on the car, and you make sure that it's right, and you put a warranty in the car. And if you're going to do that, stand behind the car and retail it, because that's the car that most new car dealers are missing. And
yeah, you know that 80%, I'm so glad you said that, 80% of 20-year-old cars are still on the road. 80%. The average age of a car on the road, period, is nearly 13 years. So if you don't take advantage of those cars, like just because you don't think they're viable, clearly the consumer doesn't agree with you. Because
correct.
they're all over the United States.
Eyes, tires, and interior. If you can make that car that way, still be at market-based pricing, you will surprise yourself. You may have some salespeople that don't want to sell them because there is some after the sale happens. You know, when you're selling a $11,000 car out of a $15 million facility, expect an $11,000 buyer to behave a little bit differently after the sale than a $50,000 buyer. They may complain about something that you may end up having to fix, or else you can't sell those cars. That's all I'm going to say. It's just a let you fix them and move on.
So as we wrap up, we started talking about transformation, innovation, reinvention, disruption, those things that get bandied about. I think they're oftentimes misunderstood or misused, sometimes overused, especially disruption. You know, when you talk about the things that you've touched on over the last 45 plus minutes, which is, I know is going to deliver tremendous value to used car managers, retailers, dealers across the country, whether they're independent or franchise dealers. And personally, by the way, I wish the term used car manager was just completely abolished. No customer wants to sit down or see the used car manager come in and appraise their car. It triggers PTSD. It kills the excitement that they had 1 minute ago, that took the salesperson 30, 40 minutes to build up. It instantaneously crushes that enthusiasm and excitement. It changes their focus from protecting themselves from what it's about to happen based on a previous experience, rather than them thinking about how tremendous life's going to be, in an hour from now when they can own that car. So I don't know why we continue to use that term when they should be, listen, if you come into my store, you're coming in to acquire a car from me. and I would like to acquire a car from you. And it's just as simple as that. And CarMax figured that out, and they brilliantly did that. And it's worked pretty well for them for the better part of 30 years. So I don't know why we don't have used car buyers rather than managers, why we're not doing evaluations or assessments on cars rather than appraisals, and giving people guaranteed values on them rather than an appraisal value. And by the way, last but not least, and I could share this with you because you're like the poster child for this. You know, when you talk about the fact that associate, you know, you care and you obsess about your associates, not just your clients, both of them. You understand if you don't do the one, the other doesn't happen. And we oftentimes forget about the fact that it's not just PTSD, that whole appraisal thing for the customer. Doesn't it trigger PTSD and anxiety in the salesperson? Do you think they're excited?
The one that points out, you hear from salespeople that it's easier to sell a car without a trade. And I'm like, oh my God,
what have we done?
Right. I can give away new cars, by the way. That's units in operation, helps my service department, gives me an opportunity in F&I and all that. But the biggest gift in life that will keep us going, even when we're not as good as our competition, is that front door. And that is that we get to take in trades, in our case with tax credits. And it's just a huge advantage. But if you have a salesperson and they're not allowed to put a number on a car. And again, I know that's tough for some people. Why? Well, they don't know how to. Well, the person that you have doing it doesn't know how to either.
No. I've got that data too. They're wrong 48% of the time. And the dollars they're wrong demolishes the time that they're right. Demolishes those dollars.
And the amount of time that they're waiting, right? So on a Saturday, in our superstore in Saco, luckily we sold 26 cars, sold and delivered 26 cars. Hopefully we sold more, but the math says 26. We had 19 trades. The ratio was great. The average person was in the store for under 2 hours and took delivery. And we stopped the clock as soon as they hit delivery because we have a genius program. And we stopped the clock because some people want to stay for an hour and some people want to leave in 3. So under 2 hours from beginning to end, and that's not because they were waiting for somebody to appraise the car. It's because it happened simultaneously after the customer went for a ride with somebody in the car into a place, and we offered them to go for the entire part of the assessment. We'll show them the software out there. And we'll show them the number, and we'll tell them all the things that we do. And because we've done it so many times, we do it fairly fast. This is how we came up with their number. And we'll ask them if they want more for their car. And by the way, it's not you that wants more for the car. It's the chair you're sitting in, because the last guy said the same thing. We actually trained to say that. And then they say, no. I've seen them on other people's lots. Well, we know what they're not selling for. That's all we know, because the ones that are on the lots are the ones that aren't sold. But let me show you all the cars that have sold. And by the way, I understand you want the most for your car, but I can take your car with your VIN number and sell it for more money than you ever can. And here's the reasons why.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can maximize the value for you and still have margin for us. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. If you're not training around that, what are you doing today?
Well, I'll tell you what you're doing. You have an unsuccessful used car department that's selling 0.5 to 1 or 0.7 to 1, and you're killing yourself.
Well, that's what you're doing. We would love to sell more used cars. For us to sell more used cars, it's this simple. We need to acquire more inventory. So we now have in each store a couple of people, and we'll be going to a third person in almost every store to just do acquisitions. And we've learned, by the way, we tried to make that a 4-day-a-week job because it's a tough job. We've learned that it almost needs to be a 5. It has to be a 5-day-a-week job to stay connected to your customers. Those people come to work at 10 o'clock and they leave at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. And they're supposed to, on a daily basis, make 4 appointments, have 3 people show, and buy 2 cars. Yep. That's the ratios. So if that's new information for somebody at the end of this program, by the way, anybody in the country is welcome to come visit our dysfunctional stores and tell us what we're doing wrong. We might pick up
dysfunctional, highly profitable, successful stores.
You
So-
might pick up a few things that we do differently.
I tell you what, I got, there's so many things I love about you, Adam. But one of them is I share this with people all the time. I said, listen, I'm a huge believer in the non-obvious and counterintuitive thinking, because intuitive thinking gets you to average. I mean, let's just be honest. You do everything that everybody tells you to do, you're going to be at average, right? I'm a believer in, do something once a day that scares the snot out of you. Right. So here's the thing. I tell people, you hear something, I'm telling you right now, if you're listening, if you hear anything that made you screech your brakes, slam on your brakes, pull over, or you're sitting in a chair and your arms are crossed right now and you're leaned back in your seat, I'm going to tell you something. Uncross your arms, lean forward, grab a pen and write it down, because the things that are making you uncomfortable are the things that aren't happening in your dealership and are the things that are costing you money. So Adam, as we wrap up, answer a couple questions for me. First of all, first car you ever owned?
A Volkswagen Beetle. I think it was probably a 63 or 64.
Ooh, oval window?
No,
window?
nothing special.
Okay. Nice.
3 pedals and not much else. And it was a car that I could actually, me or one of my friends could actually work on when stuff went wrong. And I think I paid $100 for it.
Yeah, probably a cool 70 horsepower too on that bad boy.
Downhill.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, second thing, I love the car business because?
I love the car business because of the people. I love the car business because of the optimism of the people. I love the car business because it gives people who are, in any other description, average, an opportunity to achieve major things in their lives and make a change for other people on a daily basis. And for some of us, being able to hopefully impact a lot of people's lives.
Okay, next question. Do you buy into the fact that in 2025, the innovators, the counterintuitive thinking people, right? Those that think differently, quite possibly can have the best year of their life, and other stores that may be in the same town or next town may have the very worst year of their life.
There will definitely be people who have very difficult times in this year. I don't know what the best is. I have a saying that we use often is change what you measure, you'll change what you get. So if you want to start changing things, then you got to start measuring things differently. I think we're in a fairly healthy economic environment, although things are more expensive than anybody is used to them being. That's a fact, and I think that people like you and I have a longer memory. So older people remember when things were cheaper, and we remember hearing that from our parents. So things are expensive. I think the flashy things that the car business used to be very twitchy about, subscription services, stuff like that, are not worth the time of day. Are you focusing on it? I think if you focus on having the right cars, marketing them fast, forgetting everything other than digital, that's kind of where we are now. I think the biggest process interrupters for many people is going to be if you have the wrong inventory, how do you keep it charged? And that's not a faux pas. I know how to keep gas in a car. But if you're stuck with 100 electrics and we know they have to be forklifted when they run out of power, how are you going to do that with the capacity that you have at your dealership? And here's the thing. For us, our day supply on new is about 21 days on the ground, and it's about 60 on electric. We've lowered that in the last couple of months because I've told people they are going to pay me for every electric car that sits. They're going to pay me. Like, you made $12,000 this month, you're going to pay me $200 for every electric car in your inventory at the end of the month. So if you have 5, that's $1,000 for every manager. Mm-hmm. That's how I've dealt with it. And so I'd rather take a loss now on that car than take a loss after paying more floor plan and turning it into a stone and that I have to forklift. But how do you do that when the mandate in certain states is going to be that 36% of your inventory in 2026 has to be electric? And how in the big volume store for us, call it 2,200 new, That means we're going to have to cycle through around 700 electric cars, a little bit more. That means on a daily basis, we're going to have close to 70, 80, maybe 100 of them in stock. How do you keep them charged? So that's the scary part of the upcoming future.
I think the good news is, there is a path for certain for the Trump administration to change that, because that has to be approved. Even California, that's the first one that wants to jump in with these very aggressive numbers. I did numbers, basically, think about this. Ford, if Ford sells in 26 models what they sold this year, what they're on pace to sell, they're going to owe, I believe the number was $500 million, 1% of their market cap, over 1% of their market cap in 1 year to the state of California. I think at the end of the day, we're going to see some relief. It's a matter of how long it's going to take and how much pain it's going to cause between now and then. But I do think that we're going to go in that direction. At the end of the day, think about this. You just mentioned losing money in EVs. So even with your willingness to lose money, not that you want to, but dealers' willingness, because they know that it's more expensive to keep them. So they're willing to lose thousands of dollars, in many cases over 10 grand. The Fed is throwing $7,500 to say, please, please buy this car. The OEMs are throwing thousands of dollars out there. And even with all of that, we're at 9.7%. PLF, Rivian, Lucid, Polestar, and Tesla, and we're less than 4%. There is no freaking demand. There might be 1.5% or 2% demand. I don't think they're going to go away, Adam, personally. I just think it's time to see it for what it is. If this was any other business in the world, and after all the government grants and loans and support and this and that, you had a whopping 3% market share, somebody might say, hey, maybe we need to have a different plan.
Well, this is incumbent upon everybody in the car business, is that somebody in your organization has to make a legislative commitment to be able to reach out to somebody, and I don't care if it's at the state level, federal level, county level, to say that we employ people in your district and we need to have a voice. I believe as car dealers, it's been the biggest mistake that we've made in my career by not being involved politically, relying on a few paid lobbyists and a few retailers to have a voice in Washington, have a voice in your state capital, have a voice in Sacramento, have a voice in Augusta, Maine, to stop this train, because everything sounds good until there's not enough places for people to charge, the range. And by the way, my challenge to current, and I've said this many times, to the current technology is it's temporary. It's so temporary that we've gone, and these cars that we're selling to people today will be anchors by 2030, because their ranges will be 1/3 of the range of a solid state. Their charging time will be 3 times as long as a solid state, and they're just going to be anchors to almost everybody.
Yeah, we've never seen that before, but the tech is going to age out. The tech is going to, nobody is going to want, somebody will buy a 12-year-old car, to your point. They'll buy that. Gas, no problem. Nobody's going to want that car that's got old tech, especially old tech, cold weather, altitude, towing. It's just like, it's going to be a problem.
And you can't ship them to Africa for their next life. I mean, it's all too expensive because they still are going to have to charge them, right? So we're in temporary tech. The worst place to be, and I don't know what number iPhone they're on. I know in the Samsung, because I'm 16. One of those. Yeah, and the Samsung we're on 24s. What's a 12 worth?
Yeah,
what's a 13 worth?
Nothing.
They're worth $1. Right?
Yep.
And it's because of the battery. They were fully functioning 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. They're worth $0 now. And I think that's where we're going with this current round of electric vehicles. And if you talk to all the manufacturers, they would all agree with that. So I thought the goal was to have zero emissions, not to have zero emission only electric vehicles.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Japan, by the way, and then we'll wrap up, but Japan only has 3% electric, 3% EV, but they have 48% hybrid. And oh, by the way, they have a car that already exceeds, the most ridiculously, I think, illogical, unreasonable, cafe standard. They already have a 59 mile an hour. And by the way, if you take the EV stickers, the EPA was, redid things to put them down to what a more realistic range is on those equivalent to gas. I mean, Toyota's got that. So there's no question we can get there with hybrid now. So last question, since you had talked about this willingness to leave an old friend, essentially, because it's in the intelligent best interest of your customers, your associates, and your business. First of all, how long ago did you make that switch? I was just curious. Over to VinCue.
It's been through COVID somewhere in there. So
about 4 years.
Brain, but it was
it's
definitely been a couple of years.
Okay, what's been the best thing? Tell for those people that are in that same boat that have been holding on to that, for lack of a better term, security blanket because their used car managers are so comfortable with the old tech. What's been the best thing about it?
There's been nothing bad. The difficulty has been the human interaction. In other words, people that don't want to pick up the phone and don't want to really attend the training and don't want to speak to the account manager on that side. It's very intuitive and uncomfortable at the beginning, but you know how to get past uncomfortable. Let's just keep using it, right? So you almost have to shut it off. And somebody says, well, what we're going to do is we're going to run parallel for 30 days. No, you're not.
Burn the ships.
I know what you're going to do if you run parallel for 30 days. You're never going to pay attention to the news.
Burn the ships.
So let's start it now. You don't lose any data, etc. All I can hope for is that vAuto catches up and surpasses VinCue. I don't think it's possible because they're still behaving in a nimble way, and they're reaching out to us about changes that we would like to make. And they consider us power users because of the way we turn our inventory. But they also consider us power users because of the number of people we have in the vehicle buying center. So they actually reach out to us without us asking. And like they called me a couple of weeks ago, and this is our chief technology officer and our innovation officer, and we'd like to talk to you. I said, you're talking to the wrong person. And they were like, I get it. Thank you. I said, I would like to be in the room so I can hear, but I'm not going to be the one talking. And so they did that, and they talked about how they can continue to get better. And I think the beauty is that this is really just data. How much more data? I told you the data that I wanted, which is the no sale data from Manheim. So they're going to get it somehow. I don't know if it's going to be manual or whatever it may be, but Manheim, for the money that they take in, owes that to you. They owe it to you when the car is in the lane to tell you the last time it was in the lane or how many times it's been in the lane in the last 8 weeks. Because in some cases, it's been in the lane 40 times in the last 8 weeks. It's run virtually 5 days a week for every day, and it hasn't sold. And
I think they're a little bit analogous, don't you, to the casinos and resorts in Vegas? You know what I mean? You don't pay for $1 billion, $2 billion mortgage by losing money, right? So I think the casino goers, we are the casino goers when we wander into those auctions, and we're paying a significant price. And I agree with you; it would be very interesting to get that kind of data.
I'll interrupt you for this. For the most part, the people that are spending the money, it's not their money. That's a problem, right? Yeah. So I met a guy. I used to teach people how to work the auction, and it started with get there the day before with a mechanic. Mm-hmm. Right, that's a long time ago. So that's when I was at SCT and JM&A. But so that's in the 80s, early 90s. We were teaching that. But I watched somebody, and I said, "How'd you do today?" And he said, "I bought 46 cars." And I'm like, "How is that possible?" Right? You bought 46 cars. Yeah, it was a great day. I said, "You're buying for some dealers?" He said, "I'm buying for 3 dealers. They each pay me $100 a car." So the guy made $4,600 by being the Statue of Liberty. Yeah. Right? I mean, and he's probably very good, and he was probably there the day before. And it's Orlando where they have whatever it is, 24 lanes or 18 lanes, whatever it was that day, and they were running thousands of cars, but he bought 46 cars. And it struck me that I can't let this guy buy cars for me. It's impossible. But none of it was his money. So he would hold up a different dealership number. And he said, so the people that are buying the car for the used car department, the owner, the person that's funding it, if it's a privately held company, needs to have communication with the people that are doing the acquisitions. Give them the empowerment to work backwards from retail. Tell them that the more of this you do, the better, but it doesn't mean you're going to stand there and buy every car. Figure out what we want.
I actually think, to your point, if auctions were to subscribe to the same level of transparency as we're expected to by our OEMs, we're expected to by our customers, then at the end of the day, I think they actually have a greater likelihood of being sustainably successful in the long term. Otherwise, clearly they're being disrupted. There's more and more virtual auctions that are nipping at the heels of the Mannheims and the Odessas of the world. And clearly those things happen. I always say this, disruption happens when the incumbent leaves the door open. The disruptor never has to break down the building. We leave the door open because we didn't answer the call. I don't think they're answering the call. But I do think there are some new players that are definitely have an interest in doing that. Here's one last thing for everybody listening. Thought this was interesting. That the CarMaxes and Carvanas, first of all, they own their own trucks, right? They're not paying transporters. They're not paying the auction fees you're paying. And they've got essentially first dibs at every car, across those platforms because they've got proxies everywhere. They're huge. They're efficient. They're effective. They have massive resources, but they're buying cars now that they've got the lot space and the money to buy cars now and sit on them at the lowest point now and just hang on to them till March and April. Oh, happy day, right? That a typical dealer can't do. So, you mentioned there's some very distinct advantages. We get trade-ins. We've got leases. We can do leasing. They can't do. We've got service drive. We've got off-lease cars. And if you don't leverage those things, as Edgar Castellanos said in the virtual event, if you don't weaponize those things, versus your competition as CarMax or Carvana, then you're not going to be able to stand up to them. And if you think they're going to get weaker, who are you going to bet on? You think they're going to get weaker every year? Nope. You think you're going to get stronger every year from a resource standpoint? I hope so. But if you haven't gone to one-to-one, used to new, and it's been 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I don't know what exactly is going to change that's going to cause you to go to one-to-one now, unless you start subscribing to some of these thoughts that Adam has been kind enough to share with us. And I really appreciate you doing that from the people side to the used car side. I appreciate you sharing with us how VinCue has helped you from a pricing, sales turn, what was the other one? Ideal inventory and acquisition. Right, those are the 4 big ones that they've really changed things for you.
Yeah, and they work with our recon process as well, and they help us in the marketing of the vehicle. Right, so it's all connected. But I will say this: that I hate to point it out because I know that I'm not connecting to everybody who's on here. If you got one thing out of this and you need clarity on it, please feel free to reach me. It's easy. If you go to any of our websites, my cell phone number's on there. If you want me to respond, text first. Tell me who you are. But I will continue to do these things and share the things that we've been lucky enough to succeed at or continue to work on, as long as people do actually reach out and say, hey, this helped me. This is what I'm doing. Don't try to do everything. But I promise you, if I come to your store, I'm taking something away from your store. And we'll continue to be learners as we go into 2025. But we just can't keep doing what we did before, because the beauty of our business is that you don't have to be great to get great results. We can 100%. Be great by doing things a little better than everybody else. Holding on to our people, loving on our people, holding on to our customers, loving on our customers, and making decisions that build relationships that can beat the public companies, that can beat Carvana, that can beat CarMax, so that when the people wake up in the morning and somebody says, I need a car, or somebody at the office needs a car, this is the place you should go. I'm looking at these cars on CarMax, and I found one. you don't want to buy the car from CarMax. You want to buy the car from these people because they will take care of you when something happens, with a name, a face, and a handshake and a hug.
And a connection to the community, by the way. Big time. Well, on that note, Adam Arens, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. I really appreciate the fact, and please take note, anybody listening, I love the fact that folks that are truly successful are always willing to share everything that they've learned, everything they've done, every failure they've hit, every wall they've hit, and everything they're doing now to be successful. So I want to thank you. I'm going to attempt to do something, Adam, I've never done before, post podcast. I'm going to attempt to come up with a one sheet, if you will, that's just going to be titled From the Mind of Adam Arens, and the things that you shared today, so that I can offer that up to people either on the show notes in the podcast, or I'll even probably post it on LinkedIn. And so if you want to learn what Adam has learned over a lifetime in retail automotive that's helped him achieve the success that his team is experiencing today, please, by all means, hit him up. I will share with you how to connect with Adam as well. You can go and find all of that at davidspisak.com, as well as other episodes. I thank everybody for taking the time to learn today. I consider this a class today. This was like a master class. And please share it. For anybody that truly has an interest in growing their used car department, getting better, or just learning how to be better in their business, how to be better as a leader, share this episode that Adam was kind enough to give to us. Adam, wishing you and your family all the very best for an absolutely fantastic holiday season, and look forward to seeing you, hopefully, if you're going to be in New Orleans. Are you?
I am not going to be in New Orleans. Our youngest is getting married on January 25th.
Ooh, that's the weekend.
And that is a blessing. And
it is a blessing. And congratulations.
She kept me out of New Orleans. That's a bonus.
I don't know if she's going to keep you sober that weekend, but she did keep you out of New Orleans.
Correct.
Fair enough. Well, thank you. Appreciate you guys taking the time to join. And I will see you next time on the David Spisak Show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.